Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's question and answer session on starting a handmade jewelry business. And I'm thankful for everyone who's here today to chat with me. And this is going to be fun because, usually when we're doing the classes, we get right to the project and we don't really get to share just a lot of, questions about everything handmade jewelry. So this is fun for me, and I'm thankful for you guys for being here. And so this class is recorded. There will be a replay available. It'll be on michaels.com/classes. Usually takes about a couple of days before it's posted, but we'll share a link to it when it comes up. And so I guess I'm going to get started. I have some outline notes here just to get me started talking, but this is for questions. So feel free to jump in the chat and ask questions, and Carmi will ask them, and I'll do my best to answer if I know, and I'll share a little bit about my journey. And
This
so,
is a Q&A.
I hope not.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I thought I heard a question. Okay, so something I wrote in my notes. The very first thing I thought about was why do we want to sell jewelry? Why do we want to, start our own business? And it's that entrepreneurial spirit that we all share. And it comes from, I don't know, I feel like it starts really young. And some of my earliest memories of, my grandparents coming to visit, and instead of, presenting them with this beautiful art I'd created for them, I welcomed them to come to my store and shop for some postcards that I'd drawn. And so it's, it's little things like that lead through life that, you realize, I'm a seller. I'm a person who's an entrepreneur. I want to start a business. And wherever you are in, your journey right now, that's probably at the core of it. So how to get started? And so part of that question that came to my mind when I read, starting a business, I never really thought about it, but I think knowing when you're ready to start selling can be a little bit helpful. And so some of the signs, so you've started making jewelry and you love it, and you've made a lot of jewelry, and you're like, okay, well, I'd like to start maybe seeing if there's a market for it. One way to test the waters and maybe see if you're ready to do that is to just take a look at what's happening when you wear your jewelry. And so, of course, wear your own work. If you made something and you like it, wear it. Carry your business cards with you. So when people ask you, hey, I like your earrings. Hey, I like your bracelet. Like, oh, I made it, and I do, and I sell them. So here's my card. So that's just one place to get a start. Getting your friends and family to wear your jewelry and making sure they have your cards on them so that they can too advertise for you. And that'll be a good indicator. If you start seeing a lot of positive feedback there, you can know if it's time to scale up. You're going to start getting requests. So people, family, friends, coworkers, they're going to start asking you, hey, can you make this for me? Can you make it with this color? Or, they'll bring you pictures from magazines and say, I love this. Can you make something like this? So you'll start getting that. And people will start asking, hey, where can I find your shop, your jewelry? So those are the things that started happening in my early jewelry making times. And so those were signs to me that I needed to start selling. And at that time, it was a while ago. So online platforms for, artisans there weren't any yet. And so selling in person was really the only option I had. Selling online wasn't really a thing yet. That came out a little bit later. But, so another thing I wrote down here to talk about was when you do start selling in whatever capacity you choose, in person, online, both, something to think about ahead of time is your surge capacity, because you will find that you'll need to be able to produce a consistent result and handle upticks at holiday times and events. Like you'll get asked, hey, I have this event coming and I want these type of jewelry and I need like 50 pieces. That's an opportunity. Can you produce 50 pieces in 4 weeks? Can you do that? So things like that, start thinking about what kind of business am I looking for? Do I just want to do one of a kind sales? Do I want to make what I feel like making that day and put it in my shop and see if it sells? And so just questions of style. What are you going for? What interests you? And then of course, built up inventory, that helps, because then that helps you handle a surge. If you've got a box of stuff sitting right that you can draw from. And then getting into like more of your identity as a seller. And this part was really challenging for me because I dabbled in everything. I liked wire, I liked metalsmithing, I liked beaded crochet. I was into everything. And so my work didn't really have a theme, and I didn't have a brand image. And what's weird is that kind of became my brand image. It's like, well, what am I doing today? Well, I'm doing this today, and here's a photo. And so the way I developed consistency in an image and an identity was I used my backdrops, and I used some of the same material themes. So, and I tend to go for like earth tone, woodsy themes. In some of my earlier work, you see a lot of that. But so thinking about, hey, what is my theme? And what's the personality of my business? What does that look like? And then one of the most important things I wrote down here, and this is one that I didn't think about early, but luckily for me, I like to draw, and I'm a doodler. And so often I keep a sketchbook of ideas. And I also use this book to keep track of something that I've made so that I can remember how I made it. Because here's what happens when you start growing. And so, for example, you begin selling a lot, people discover you and they scroll down your feed. They're like, oh, look at this, look at that. And they'll ask you, can you make me this piece? And they'll send you a screenshot, and you made it a year ago. You don't remember how you made it, what color you used. So it's very helpful. And this is a really messy book, but I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've just got scribble after scribble of just, you know, bead counts, colors, DB numbers, you name it. And then just ideas. And some of these ideas I've made, and some of them are waiting for a day when I'll make them. So that's another great thing is to, and I have a miniature one that goes with me and sits next to me because I wake up with ideas and have to sketch them down. And so definitely make friends with a notebook, get some colored pencils, and draw your dreams.
All right, Danielle.
Yeah.
I have quite a few questions from the sidebar for you.
Awesome.
Some of them are the same, but you know what? I think I'd like to start with the one that makes sense. Is what was the first thing you decided to sell, and where did you sell it?
Oh, okay. So I thought about that one. And so I guess the first time I was actually asked to sell something was I was making these crochet collars with little crystals on them. And I made friends with a local bead store manager, and she was selling her jewelry in the store on consignment. And she had all these shelves, empty shelves. And she's like, well, why don't you put your collars here and some of your scarves that you've been making, and we'll see. And so to my surprise, these things were selling, and I couldn't figure out why. And that brings me into another part of my talk, which is product placement and setting. For example, things that will sell in person, but when you put it online, it doesn't go anywhere. But in person, in the right setting, you see it moving like a lot. And so in the case of these collars, just as an example, I was living on an island that was rainy and cold and touristy. So it was just across from Seattle, a little island called Bainbridge. And people would like to come over there and have coffee on a Saturday morning, watch the ships, go to the pub. There was a bookstore right next to this shop where my friend worked. And so she put my collars in the window. She put the little scarves in there. And people would walk from the bookstore to the coffee shop and pay $50 for a scarf that, you know, online they wouldn't pay $10 for. So it was just, it's environment, it's setting. It's, are people there to shop? Are people there having a good time, or are they in a hurry? So yeah, the first thing I sold, I think I have a picture of what they looked like. I don't know if I can share the crochet collars. I figured that would come up, so I was ready. Here's an example. That's really tiny.
Wow. Danielle, I'm glad you're doing this Q&A because even I haven't seen these. So this is
We're
great.
going back in time here, like a long way.
You actually had somebody in the sidebar who does do crochet jewelry, so I'm sure she'll
really?
appreciate your comments tonight.
That's awesome.
The other question you're getting a lot of tonight is, how do you price? How do you determine your pricing?
It's a really good question, and I'm better at it now than I used to be.
So tell us where you went wrong in the beginning and how you price now.
So in the beginning, I did not take into account my time, because to me it was still, I started as a hobbyist seller. So to me, I was entertaining myself and I was subsidizing my hobby. So my time was zero. And I never factored that in. And that carried forward into later stages of my selling, where I didn't know how to value my own time. I was pretty good at pricing stuff based on what I'd spent. I was spending too much, by the way, but I got there, and I would, uh, I would pretty much just put in a big zero from my time. And I think that was the biggest problem. But now I really do keep track, and that's where this notebook comes in again. When I make something, sometimes I'll write down how long it took me or an estimate of how long it might take me to make it again. And I keep track of what I spent a lot better than I used to.
That's great. And question two about platforms. Where are the places that you have been successful selling jewelry? In person, you've mentioned, but have you done shows? You have a website, Etsy. What's your favorite
Yeah.
place to sell?
Well, so when I first started selling, it was about 2007, and Etsy was brand new. And I put my work up, and there were some things that did sell. I mean, we're talking about some small numbers, but really without doing any advertising, it would move. However, fast forward a decade, that market is saturated. And I posted and I waited and I waited, and not so much. But what I found was, the best place to sell for me at that time, and probably even, once we're allowed to go to stores again, in person, selling in person generates online sales. So you show up at a show, you have your cards out, and people see stuff. They like what they see. They want to see, perhaps they buy a piece, and then they go home and they check out, a little bit more about the maker, or someone asks them about it, so they want to get a gift. And so your in-person sales are going to drive your online sales. But as far as just being organically found online, that is very, very hard to do without a really heavy social media presence. It's a different market than it was when I started. But I think some of the things that might still be true that worked for me at the time was, of course, I mentioned selling on consignment. Two really great things about selling on consignment. One is you don't have to be a licensed business license, reseller permit, all of the works. You can sell small, and you can sell without having to do a lot of work. You bring your pieces to the shop. They handle the sales tax. They take a cut, but you're going to spend that shipping and managing a business. That those costs are things that they're taking on. So I felt that the consignment cut was completely worth it. And then of course there's other things, like I wrote down galleries that feature handmade artists. There were a lot of those in the little tourist town where I was living at the time. So these were galleries that were like, hey, local artist makes this item, makes that item. And they had glass blown work, and they had paintings and watercolor, beautiful stuff that people had made, wood carvings. And they put some of my rings in one of those, and they did really well there too. But I feel like when people are in person and they're seeing it, it's just so much easier. It's hard to portray the beauty of a piece online. And selling online is also challenging because if you think about, our perception of color and scale are dependent on what language we're speaking, our monitor settings. There's so many different things. Like I remember I was working with a customer on a custom order. She wanted all a set for her bridesmaids. And so this was a big order for me. I was putting my heart in it, and I laid out all these beautiful colors. And she said, well, I'd like the purple one. There was no purple on that tray. There was a cornflower blue and a cobalt blue, but there was no purple. And so what do? Do I go back and say, hey, she's like, I love it. I want the purple one. I'm like, so I have a happy customer. Just don't know which one was the winner. So instead of saying, hey, they're blue, I said, oh, you meant this one. And I sent another picture back with just that one in the photo. I guessed the cornflower. I guessed right. But so you see, selling online is hard. It is really challenging. And it's challenging for people who've been doing it forever. It's challenging for new people. I'm not saying don't do it, but it's, I feel like in person is a great way to start. That's that. If I had to do it over again, I probably would have focused more on the in-person selling, less on the online aspect.
And Danielle, that leads into a question you're getting a lot of there's a lot of comments on is how did you manage to get a following for yourself on Etsy and other locations that wasn't just your family and local friends? What do you think, what made you stand out on Etsy?
I think, I don't know. I think even to this day, I wouldn't say I stand out on Etsy per se. I think what's driving some of the sales there are the relationships through blogging. So I joined A Beaded Life in 2018, and I began to write about handmade jewelry for them. And I think that really grew my social media because people wanted to know about how do you do a photograph? What about lighting? All these questions. And so that and some tutorials, and I would post for that. And then I joined a ton of Facebook groups that had other people with like interests and started making friends online. And so then we'd all follow each other. And so I think, and it wasn't overnight. It was like a 4 or 5 year thing before I felt like I had somewhere where I could advertise, meaning meaningfully post something, have someone see it, and ask me to buy it. Before that, I don't feel like I had that, and it took a long time.
So when you talk about in-person selling, you mentioned the stores and that, but how about shows and whether it's a church basement or a craft sale?
Oh yeah, and this is like there's so many opportunities out there that you can do. So I wrote down things like yoga studios, your local hairdresser. These are all places where um, I think that I've either seen other people sell jewelry or have sold my own. My local hairdresser used to carry some of my work and she put my cards out. And so I would get some business there. Craft fairs, holiday bazaars. My local high school has a holiday bazaar. So I set up a table there once a year, and that's a big night because people are prepared to spend money. They show up, it's for a good cause. You do have to pay for the table and you have to make a donation for the raffle, which is usually just one of your pieces. But
Hmm.
it's worth it because you sell a lot there and because everyone's there to shop. They're there with the goal of buying something. And so those are the places to be. Farmers markets and any festivals that you can join. Um, there's a local one here in Seattle called Folk Life, and the jewelry sales at Folk Life are really great. People are just excited about really long, like summer fair necklaces. So many necklaces sell at that event, and across the country, there's a lot of events just like that. So just knowing,
Danielle,
like, go ahead.
when you do a show like that, people want to know how much inventory do you build up?
Oh yeah, so I have a lot of really lessons learned on that. So going back to having a theme, when I first set up to sell, I brought everything I had, and I had trays of stuff. I carry around these like kind of baskets. Let me bring my basket over. But I've got baskets of stuff with all kinds of examples of finished pieces in them, priced out, ready. But what I found was that I did better selling in person if my table had a theme, it had clean lines, and it had things grouped by like type of jewelry versus if I just threw it out on the table. And so what I mean by that is, oh gosh, so here's a bar. And as an example, which one of these makes your eye feel calmer and which one of these kind of stresses you out? Notice this side has a theme and it draws me to it because now I can express myself personally by choosing the color I want. Versus here, I've got all of the artist's expression. So this is all about the artist. And maybe that's what you're looking for. You want to see the artist's feeling, what they've put together, but it's cluttered. There's charms on everything. And what I found was that the work that was pretty nondescript sold more than the stuff I'd put my heart into and just went crazy with all the doodads, right? I don't know why that's the case, but I think it's because people want to make it their own. And if it's got all of your personalization, like my hummingbird charms and things on it, it doesn't have the ability for somebody to adopt and say, I relate to this and I chose that color or I chose that color because that speaks to me. And there's also something about there's just, it's easier to shop this way than that way.
I
I hope that
agree.
makes sense. Yeah.
I'm shopping right now and we'll be calling you after our class today.
Yeah.
Danielle, people are really curious to how you decided your packaging.
Package.
How do you present the pieces in a booth? Are they always in a package or do you have them out of the package?
A little of both. And I discovered early that people want to touch and try and feel and try them on. And so what I would do is I would have things out that they're of a type, cuff bracelets. And I'd have 3 different sizes on the bar for people to try on. And then I'd go to my bracelet bucket and pull one out that matched. So if someone said to me, I really like this, do you have it in another color? Then I've got the bucket and everything in here is sized. So, and I do keep these in their packaging because like say this one, 6 interest, right? Sizing was very hard for me to get right. And honestly, I still struggle with it. It's really hard. So the way I got around that, and we are doing a class on designing bracelets. It's coming up in May. And I'm going to talk about how to design jewelry for somebody that you don't know their wrist size, and how to sell online that way. It's really hard to sell online for bracelets, especially. And maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit about that. But like, for example, if you tell a customer, measure your wrist and tell me what your wrist size is, they're going to take a tape measure and they're going to do that as tight as they can on their wrist. And they're going to tell you, oh, 6. And you're going to sell them a bracelet that's 6 inches and they're not going to be able to put it on. It happened to me so many times and I got so many returns. And I finally figured out that what I really need to do is standardize my sizing. So the way I did that was I decided I'm going to sell 6.5, 7, 7.5, 6, and make some adjustable for people who don't know or if they're buying a gift. So I always have these sizes and I'll make 2 of every kind in each size. Or the alternative is to make your design adjustable. And one way to do that is to put, chain or some extra leather on your bracelet. That means more than one person can wear it.
Those are great tips. A couple people have noticed though your the packaging. Is that packaging being made for you? Are you cutting the packaging yourself?
I've done a little of both. The ones that I have here and the ones that I use the most were made by a friend of mine with her Cricut. And so I'm not a Cricut expert myself, but this is another way to, kind of join forces with another maker. And, that is a great way also to increase your sales, because what happens is people ask me, where did you get those cards? And I point them to her. And people ask her, hey, where'd you get that bracelet? And she points them to me. So it's just partnerships like that. But she makes these, this was something I had seen on Pinterest. And I asked her, can we do something like that for me? And I provided the dimensions. And she has it, she cut some for me. And she did that font for me with my name. And I have two earring card sizes. So small. And then a big earring size, which can also be, nice for a necklace, and long earrings.
For the dusters.
Yeah, for those dusters. And you'll notice all this stuff's in plastic. So jewelry findings particularly, they're going to tarnish, and they're going to tarnish really quickly, especially if you live somewhere that's humid, or, like on a rainy climate, like where I live, is kind of monsoon climate. All metals are going to do that. And so if you store them in packaging like this, you're going to increase their life, because, you want it to look new. If somebody's shopping, and that goes back to my bar and my box, I let people try it on here, and then I sell them the brand new one that's in my packaging here. I'll pick up.
Great idea.
Yeah. And so, and often I'll sell out of one size, and that will be my indicator. Hey, make more size 7 inch and make less size 6, like that. And so just keeping track of that info back to the notebook. Every time I notice, hey, I just sold out of all my 7s again, just make more 7s.
Danielle, you said that you started out as a hobbyist. At what point did you get serious about it? And then did you get a business license, or how are you set up as a maker?
Surprisingly recently, actually. So what happened is I wanted to join an event that required a business license. And some events are totally cool with you showing up. They collect the sales tax and remit it for you. Others, they want you to do that yourself. And so you have to display that you're a legit business. So they want to see a permit, and you have to be registered with your local, here in Washington State where I am, it's the Department of Revenue. And so without, like a tax ID to pay your taxes, it kind of limits your venues. And so there was that event. I really wanted to do that event. So I decided there's my first nudge. The second one was I had built up such an amassed amount of inventory that, I mean, I had boxes in here. I had boxes of stuff because I used to be able to, go to more events and sell things, but it's just, I needed to go somewhere where there's going to be more customers, right? And so there was that. And then I was spending more because I wasn't buying wholesale. And the weird thing about buying wholesale, you don't want to do that too early, because then you'll end up with a bunch of stuff you're not going to use. You have to have been doing this a while and figure out, what am I buying over and over and over again, where it makes it worth it to meet that huge minimum that a wholesale, because the pricing is great for wholesale, but you have to meet these mins and you need to buy a lot of one thing. And so you get on these wholesale websites and you just get so excited. You're like, oh, I love. And you start filling your cart and you're like, whoa, I just built the biggest cart of my life. Well, the thing is you don't need to buy everything wholesale. You can still buy some stuff retail. And of course, there's anywhere you have a chance to buy in bulk. I am a clearance magnet. If I see a clearance sale, I go there, because even as a wholesale buyer, clearance is pretty close to wholesale pricing. It's basically a big seller that said, look, I have sunk cost here that I'd like to re-realize. So they're throwing that in the bucket, saying, maybe a few cents above what they paid for it, really, and grab that stuff. If it's something you think you might use, definitely. And then of course the places where you shop regularly, that you keep buying that same thing over and over. If you see a sale, go ahead and buy a bunch of that at that time, if you know you've used it in the past. But again, it's just keeping that data. And that's
and I think that's important, because I mean, I'm a wholesale company, so I know what you were just talking about. You would not qualify to be a customer unless you had a business tax license and that you were properly set up. So that might have been a good incentive for you to do all the paperwork. But of course, people are curious now, do you need an accountant to do your, filings for your taxes, or how are you doing it yourself?
So I'm doing it
Paperwork.
myself currently, regrettably. I'm at a stage now where I need to think about, what do I want to do? Because it got bigger than me last year. The year before that, it was fine. I did it myself. It took me like 6 hours or whatever, but now it's too much. And I can't keep up with my own selling. And so at the moment, I'm just a sole proprietor, which means I can't hire anyone to help me. I would have to go and update my license to become an LLC. And when you become self-employed, even as a sole proprietor, there are new costs that I didn't have as a hobbyist. So one of the biggest ones as in the US is you'll have to pay Social Security tax as someone who's self-employed. Usually you go to work, your employer takes care of that. Well, I didn't realize that was an additional cost in my, federal income tax every year. And you need to start paying quarterly. You can't just pay once a year anymore. So what I would recommend is not doing it the way I did it. Actually hire someone to help you at the early stages and walk you through it and say, hey, this is what you need. And it'll cost a little bit of money and it'll seem like you're wasting your money at the time, but it's not, because unless you're an accountant or a CPA, or you have a CPA in the family, it's something that you're going to spend more time working on that than enjoying making your product.
Exactly. So Danielle, I'm going to switch you from talking about the business, and people would love to hear some real comments from you. How do you handle a disappointed customer?
So definitely, well, the best way is to avoid their disappointment by predicting what's going to disappoint them and fixing it first. But of course, that's not always possible to do, especially when you start to grow. Because see, there's these early stages where you can focus really, really in depth on one person and you can get it right for that person and you know exactly what to do. But then suddenly that person is 50 people. And now how do I do that at a big scale? That's very, very hard to do alone without help, without keeping really good notes. So how to handle it when I've made a mistake? First of all, own it. Just own it. Be like, sorry, I'm so sorry. My bad. I did this and I'm going to fix it. And yeah, we live in a world where retailers eat that cost. Even if you're not in the wrong, even if the customer gave you information that wasn't correct about what they wanted and you worked up something and you shipped it and they got it and it wasn't what they wanted. We live in a world now where you can return things without questions. And that's just the business climate we're in. And that cost it needs to be worked into the price of your pieces. So something I've started doing recently and kind of going back to pricing is a lot of big companies will call that their G&A. Like it's just a number that they tack onto everything and it covers a lot of stuff. Well, I have a number in there to cover the cost of when I make a mistake, when I have to ship something again, because you not only did you pay to ship it, you're going to pay to ship another one and all the material costs that's associated with that. And I was very surprised at the end of the year last year when I calculated that number and I saw, wow, that was a lot more money than I thought it was because it adds up over time. When you ship something, it's at a minimum, it's going to cost you about $4 to ship in the States. And that can be as high as $9 if you've made a mistake because you're going to ship priority then, right? So price it in. Try really hard. Pay attention when you're packing those orders. Make sure you put the right thing in the right box. I've done that too. I've shipped, gotten all of it in, printed my labels, got the packing slips, put them in the wrong envelopes. Went to 2 different customers and I had to refund both of them because in one case it was a custom and this was during the pandemic, so we weren't doing returns at that time. And so yeah, I just made a brand new one, shipped it.
For both.
Yeah, it is what it is, right?
Danielle, I just wanted to tell you, like on the sidebar, we are getting a lot of questions about licensing and taxes, and I'm just going to let everyone know we can't answer all of them because obviously I know it's different throughout the US and Canada. So I'm going to let those questions go and just remind people that, it's so easy to just Google that question locally and get an answer to it. And I'm going to have you keep answering questions about making jewelry. So one of the earlier questions we got is, we live in a world where there are dollar stores and lots of really inexpensive, cheap and cheerful jewelry. How do you handle your pricing is so much higher type comment?
Yeah, it's hard because we can't compete with something that was factory made. And so, for example, it's possible to mass produce jewelry that looks really nice and it's available for really low prices. But at the end of the day, there's still some niche areas where we can meet a demand that isn't being met by those companies. And one of those areas is in customization. And of course, in just the charm and the character of it being handmade in general. And so working on that and then studying the market to see, well, where is handmade jewelry popular? And what kind of customers want to buy handmade jewelry versus just getting it at, the local place where they buy clothing, right? It's changing all the time. That's one of the catches that I found is that it is changing quite a lot. But people do browse Instagram. They'll browse hashtag beaded jewelry and they'll just scroll. And if it's for sale and it's easy to buy, you'll get sales from that.
Exactly. And Danielle, one of your other fortes is photography. So you're getting quite a few questions on how do you photograph your jewelry or how are you making your jewelry look good, especially if anyone's been to your Instagram page. It all looks beautiful.
Oh, thank you. So photography has actually been my nemesis for a very long time. And some of my earlier opportunities to do some work for some companies preferred a background that was just white. And to this day, I cannot get white background photography. I'm still challenged by it because it changes the way color is displayed on the camera. And I'm not an expert at photography, so I am using my iPhone. I did try a bunch of other cameras. I borrowed a really nice camera from a friend and also My father-in-law's a photographer, and I had him give a try at taking some pictures with a really nice camera. iPhone pictures, still better. I don't know why, but only on certain backgrounds. So that flat matte surface, you don't want to use something that's shiny in the background or lacquered. So for example, you know those like places where you can paint pottery and they give you that matte finished thing before you paint it? I grabbed a bunch of those, and those solved some of my white background photography problems because it absorbed the light that was creating all the really harsh shadowing. So matte surface, wood is beautiful, unfinished wood in a dark color is really great for iPhone photography. And then for your lighting, you want the brightest lights possible that simulate sunlight, but not direct. You don't want to take a direct light and just put it right on your piece and just start shooting. And I've tried a lot of different things, and this is going to sound really crazy, but honest to goodness what I do. I have these really bright, like 6,500 Kelvin lights that are on this just regular kind of lamp, and they're special bulbs. I got them on Amazon. I put them behind me. So I've got a tray here. The lights are behind me, and I'm using my body as the diffuser. It's like pushing the light around me and just taking the photo. That way there's no shadowing. And you can try different angles. If you're next to a window, pick up one of like, if you have like one of those plastic bins that they sell at Michael's, like those photo things, that's actually what I use. I pick up my little photo carrier, set it to the side where the window is. Some of that light is still coming through, but it's scattering it. So you don't get that harsh glare against your pieces. And then also I have noticed that if you're using the phone, closer pictures are more impressive than those far away flat lays. The far away flat lays, professional photographers, you need them for that. But a close up at an angle, the iPhone is great on pictures like that. And if you start now when you go and you look at the feeds of other designers, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, they've got that at an angle, right, to where they're photographing, and it's close.
And you're doing all your own photography?
I am doing all my own, except for the ones for some of our classes were photographed by Leo at John B. Who is
no, but
a professional photographer.
But we always say your pictures they stand alone, so they're fine too, but you're also self-taught making videos now.
Yeah, and so there's been a lot of learning curve for me because, things evolve. So I started selling my work, my finished pieces. And one of the first things that started to happen was I'd get asked, what bead is that? What finding is that? What thread did you use? The next thing you know, I was teaching, and it happened without me even deciding to teach. It just one day I woke up and I was answering more questions about how than how much. And so that evolved into doing some work on Facebook for some small bead shops. And for them, I started trying to improve how I explain what I'm doing. And video was the most recent thing. The first thing I tried to do is learn how to make my own beading diagrams. Because, as a seed beader, have you ever tried to read seed bead instructions just in words? Like, go in through the next bead, go back through that bead, go through the next one. You lose people in the first sentence. So you need a picture, and it needs to be a picture that makes sense. And so I taught myself Illustrator about 1.5 years ago. I started learning, and it was a steep learning curve for me, but I do not regret doing it. It's opened a lot of doors. And then video. So video is the final frontier. Video, okay, I'm using the iPhone still. Crazy. I've tried a lot of cameras. Yeah, I've got the iPhone on a mount. It holds over the mat. I'm doing that same lighting trick. I move the light behind my head and point it down. And then sometimes if it's bright through the window, I'll bring that plastic box up and set it next. Just play with your space. Test it out, see what works for you. And then after I film the video, I take and immediately on the phone still, move those brightness settings all the way up, get it brighter. Bring it into either iMovie or Premiere Rush or Premiere Pro or any other software that you like. I think there's a new one out on the Mac. I haven't tried it. I'm still using iMovie and Rush, but bring those into those programs and you can edit your clips. You can take the sound away. You can add new sound. You can add text. You can montage stuff. I'm starting to play with that. But now all of a sudden, you're not a jewelry designer anymore. You're all these other things, right? You're a tax accountant, and you're a photographer, and you're a videographer, and you're a packaging expert, and you're a supply chain expert, and you're all these things, right? So small business owners is the best way to work harder than you've ever worked.
Danielle, there are quite a few people agreeing with you because obviously, um, selling jewelry during a pandemic hasn't been easy because of all the live events have been canceled. How has your year been for selling jewelry this past year?
Well, this past year has been so unusual. But at the beginning of the year, this all kind of started last February 2020. I got back from Tucson and I had a bunch of stuff I was ready to launch. And when I launched it, it didn't sell. And I couldn't figure out why. But people aren't buying jewelry because they're not going out. They're not going anywhere. That's all going to change soon with any luck. Well, hopefully at some point, people are going to be just let out and they're going to want to glam up and they're going to come to us and buy jewelry. I know that's coming and we're going to be ready. But last year was hard. Last year was rough because I couldn't sell in person and I had just staged like my business to do that because I got the licenses. I was about to buy a table and a tent. I was ready and then it all just dried up and none of the events took place. And it was depressing. It was disheartening. And I didn't really know, like, am I going to still be doing this in a year? I wasn't sure, but it worked out. And I think definitely, don't give up. That's one of the things I wrote down here. And it was an important thing. It was an important theme for me. It's like recognizing that it's a process. The first couple of years, they're not going to look even profitable, right? It's possible because even if you make a lot of money, you're going to reinvest it because you want to grow, right? And so the key point on that is just to focus on your successes. What did I do well? And how do I do that more? And what did I not like? What made me unhappy? What did I struggle with? And look to avoid those things in the future. Don't put yourself through that. Just decide, you know what, I really don't like making that anymore. So I'm not going to make those anymore. That's totally okay. Because at the end of the day, we are our own bosses. And that's part of the benefit being a small business owner is you call the shots, right? If something is not making you happy, try something different.
Danielle, a couple people have been asking tonight, where do you get your inspiration for jewelry?
Lots of places.
Do you have a favorite designer or a style or an artist?
It's all of those things. I think I have lots of people that inspire me out there for sure, but I'm drawn to certain components and colors. And then there's also, I think there's just this engineer in my head that has to try it. And then I'll come up with something and I'll be like, oh, I love that thread path. And I'll get fascinated with that. And then I have to see all the ways I can modify it. And of course I have to document it. And then I have to make all the colors. And so, yeah, a lot of my inspiration comes from that, not necessarily from what I've seen, out there in like the fashion industry. A lot of people will look at fashion magazines and say, oh, I love this and that and that. I get that, but I have a hard time duplicating what I see. I try to make something I see on a gorgeous designer's page, and I don't like my result. But then when I do my own thing, I'm like a little happier, and I have the added benefit of now I can help someone else make that, and that to me is it's a surprisingly fulfilling thing. I didn't see that coming, but I actually really love designing for sharing with other people.
Which is awesome because quite a few of your students are here tonight and they do not want you to give up teaching. And I'm just wondering if maybe this past year being more visible as a teacher, whether that's probably contributed to you having possibly more sales.
Oh, absolutely. And it's definitely driven sales of things like my kits, because I started to design kits for people to create with. And again, for those things like where if I've inspired someone, it just feels so good knowing I did that I don't know if I did, like I said, I didn't see that coming, but it's more fulfilling than seeing someone wearing my jewelry. That used to be like the thing. Like I would see somebody's wedding photo and all the bridesmaids had something I made on their wrist, and that would just light me up. I'm like, oh, I made that. And now I'm like, oh, look at all these people who posted this thing that when I was making it on the bead mat, I wasn't sure if this was something that was going to be scrapped or not, but it worked and now everyone's liking it. And that feels so good. It's like, wow, people like that design. And so definitely going to keep teaching. Don't worry about that. I like it too much.
Which is beneficial for everybody because you're one of the few teachers that You're truly giving away your designs. You've left them open to people to use and mass produce if they want to, which is very generous and unusual. And we're grateful for it. So I think there's a lot of students here who think that way. But having said that, is there anything you make that you would not teach? Is there anything you keep for yourself?
Not really. The only things I avoid teaching are things I think I can't teach in an hour. Speaking for our current environment, like where we're if it's something I can't help hands-on with, and I think it will frustrate people and they might not like it, then I won't teach it. But there's nothing that, like, I think is my design, because truth out there, guys, everyone can copy what you're doing. It's going to happen. People are going to copy you, but you can see that as a huge compliment. And another thing I noticed is when people try to copy, it just doesn't have your spirit. So you're still unique, right? Their version's always going to be different. And even if it's the same design, sort of, it has your spin, right? And you'll start to see that as you develop your voice as a designer. You'll see that, oh, I don't have to worry about people copying me, because number one, they're actually helping you, because they're telling you what people like. They're giving you feedback. They're providing you with data that you can use when you're making your decision about what to make more of and what to expand on. So yeah, when you're onto something, people are going to copy you. So keep doing it.
Yeah. Danielle, we're just getting to know you a little bit better tonight, because normally you're teaching the entire time a technique.
Yeah.
There's a few people want to know, like, where did you come from? This is not where you started in your 20s. What did you go to school for, and how did you end up here?
Oh man, I have done a lot of stuff. So I came from, well, my most recent, I have 2 bachelor degrees. My most recent was in IT. So I was in supply chain procurement, which was a lot of database work. And so yeah, I bought things for a living, but it was a desk job. It was hard work. There was a lot of travel, but I learned a little bit about, just doing business in general, especially pricing, because part of my job was to examine what something costs from the bottom up. And so that helped me with this a lot, I would say. And then of course the IT background has been very helpful in tooling myself for these new endeavors.
And you're also a mom. I know you're a mom.
Oh yeah, and that's why my career changed. Because I probably, would have, life has this inertia to it, and making big transitions is scary and hard and doesn't really suit my personality. So having not had my boys, I may not have actually made this change. I think I would still be doing what I was doing before, but I reached a point with my boys where going back to what I was doing wasn't really feasible for me. And they had, they're the cutest little guys. They need a lot of extra care. And so I needed to be home. But at the same time, I'm this professional, and I worked hard, to become, somewhat academic, I guess, or whatever the word is for it. And now all of a sudden I had this gap. Like, I didn't do anything all day. And I didn't actually have anyone to talk to. And the kids are screaming at me, and I'm just like, I needed something, right? I needed to do something. And so it's been amazing to turn my free time into something that I can share with other people and can make a little bit of money on the side, and it feels good.
And how do you carve your time out to get your work done?
So in the early days, it was just, I had everything on the dining room table and I'd work on it while life was going on around me. And it was always something I could drop, right, and go and work on something else. This past year has been a little tougher, because now we've had to homeschool both of our kids for the entire year. And that, I had no idea how hard work it is to be a teacher. Respect teachers. Please take my children back. Yeah, it was, oh my goodness. This whole thing with the homeschooling, that derailed my entire plan, all the plans I had for kits I wanted to make and tutorials I wanted to write. But on any given day, I may only get like an hour to actually work on those things. So it's been tough. I think that overall, though, being home working from home is still easier than having to drive in somewhere. So it's definitely still a plus, right? But pandemic aside.
So from a time management standpoint, yeah, and you do work for John Bead, so I know how much work you're doing. That's definitely a lot on the go. You are working nights and weekends. You're working around the clock, and
What's
around
like
your kid's schedule.
well, those are like the prime times, right? Because during the regular workday when I should be working, I'm in kindergarten. Literally, I'm in kindergarten during those times. So it's when you see my emails at like 11 at night, that's when I get to do that, right?
Yep.
So I'm happy to do it. And I also I just I guess I don't know, in my early 20s, I didn't have the what's it called, the ability to look at the bigger picture that I feel like maybe I have a little bit more of now, where I started to realize what a huge opportunity it is to get to work hard on something. Because I would be very bored if I didn't have these challenges to take on. And that gives me the bravery to try stuff that scares me to death, like do Q&As about my business. It's if I didn't have that feeling that, you know, this is going to inspire other people, and also it's gonna inspire me too.
I agree, because I think we have a lot of new people tonight, and I just want to remind them that you've already taught almost 40 classes for Michael's.
Yeah.
And if they haven't seen them, or they're just meeting you for the first time, Michael's keeps everything. All the classes are on the YouTube channel. And if you go to the to see any of Danielle's classes, click in the description and you'll have access to the amazing project PDFs that she's created. Because again, one of the great things you do in terms of teaching is to provide a written document with some illustrations. And I just also wanted to point out, for anyone who noticed, is Michael's is having a huge sale right now. So, you
Yeah.
know, stocking up, you know, it's great to know when there are sales and when to stock up, because Danielle, people want to know behind you, where did you get your beautiful wall of beads? You're
Oh,
getting some
you sent
questions
me the
about
bead.
how do you keep track of your supplies?
Well, it's kind of organization is because of, I guess just because of the way my mind is structured, I'm calmed by organizing stuff. I enjoy doing it. That's really weird, but I do keep things organized by bead size, by color, and then of course now I have to keep track of what's my inventory like for my store, and what's my inventory for my teaching and my work with that stuff. So I've got that stuff kind of separated. And then, you know, this display, if you guys want to know about this pegboard, that's really cool. It's really handy unless you have a cat. If you have a cat, it's going to be less handy. But I would recommend something like that so you can see your beads. If you're looking to get a creative inspiration from your materials, putting them in boxes where you can't see them isn't going to help with that. I find that I don't have the current environment where I can have everything out. But what I do is I have these like boxes of discovery, right? So I put stuff away when I'm not using it anymore. When it's been sitting on that desk for like 3 weeks and I haven't touched it, it goes away for a while. Categorize it back where it goes. Bring out a new box of treasures. Open it up. Just throw it out there. Let it sit. You'll find what's on your desk. You'll pick it up and you'll work with it. And so it's one way to inspire yourself is just from what you got in your, you know, in your materials inventory.
Danielle, I want to ask you, we're 5 minutes out, and there's just a couple of really practical questions people would love to know. You have a website and you have an Etsy store.
Mhm.
And do you need a website if you have an Etsy store, in your opinion?
The website's a really new thing for me. I did not need it to sell my finished jewelry. Instagram was my advertising place, and Etsy was where I sold. Etsy was really just the transaction, right? People have turned up there to pay, and it helped me with shipping cheaper. Um, the website, I needed that, and I had a friend who helped me with that. Thank you, Renee. But the website, I wanted that to share tutorials. I had nowhere to share a file. It's very, you can't send a file in Messenger on Instagram. You know, I was literally like in Instagram's profile, I was putting a link tree with Google Drive links to my documents so people could find. And not everybody has Facebook anymore. So it used to be like I put it in the file section on Facebook, but couldn't do that either. So the website for me, mainly a gallery, a showcase, and a place that I could share files. And that's
Perfect.
really, yeah.
I think that explains it. And there was a quick question: is Facebook versus Instagram, or do you do both?
Both, but I've automated it so that Instagram will share with Facebook if I post and vice versa.
Okay. And I'm gonna. It's not my favorite question, but it's a really great practical one. Is would you recommend a good system for people to accept payments? Are you using anything special outside of Etsy?
So in a online, I'm only using Etsy just because it's easier for me and they take care of the sales tax. So right now, sales tax is really complicated. Um, it's I don't want to worry about it. Etsy takes care of it for you. But in person, I'm using the Square. And what this
You
is a little chip reader, and now people can also tap to pay on it. So that makes it really easy. Having said that, you do still need to bring cash to make change because people still use cash. I don't know. People will walk up and hand you a 20, and if you don't have change, which happened to me, but yeah, the most of my transactions were going through the Square in person.
Perfect. Danielle, there's only about 2 minutes. So I want to ask you, getting back to you've been selling for a long time. Could you give us something positive to end with? Maybe what was the best thing that you managed to sell online, or the biggest surprise?
Oh gosh, I really love selling everything. So I think the biggest surprise more for me is just how it evolved into getting to be here today, getting to talk to you guys and share all of this. I would not have believed you if you'd told me, about 7 years ago, this is what you'll be doing. I would have been like, no, no, really? That's awesome, but I wouldn't have guessed it. I mean, when I first started making jewelry, my goals were completely different. I did it because I wanted to make friends, and I was in a new city and I didn't know anyone, and I walked into a bead store to make friends and start a new hobby, and somehow it turned into this business and this career path, and I would have never guessed. So the positive spin there is just trust yourself to do what you're enjoying doing and keep trying and see where it goes.
That's perfect. Again, you're getting lots of thank yous. We only did have an hour. So for anyone here who's new, definitely check out Danielle on Instagram. Danielle Wickes Jewelry is easy to find. If you're one of her students, please tag her and make it with Michael's for all her projects. And again, every Friday night at 5 p.m. Central Time, we're teaching amazing classes. So please join us.
Yep, absolutely. Join us next Friday for we're making a pendant necklace. Really great to see you guys then.
Lots of thank yous, Danielle.
Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and have a great rest of your Sunday.